stung by a wasp under my dress on my stomach. And I was like, it's just a day. And I'm over here like hot sweating out from a sting. And I'm like, it's going to be all right. We're going to limp our way through this. Oh my goodness. It's been, I don't know. He just went up my dress and decided that I needed to die. And I was like, well, I didn't make you go there. I didn't sit on you. I didn't step on you. You just zoomed up, got scared about your situation, and took me out. But I'm currently just talking to myself until people show up. So that is what it is. Let me turn it on to chat filter all messages. Now I can see everybody. Gonna make some tea and see if that'll calm down my histamine reaction. Although technically green tea can block the DOA enzyme. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't really drink. I don't know. I was looking at studies about that, and it's like a huge amount of consumption, and they were looking at like isolated compounds, and wherever we look at that, there's problems with it, right? So, anyhow, gonna make some tea. I'm gonna make that same Nilgiri forest from the Young Mountain tea that I made last time. I've been really liking this one. She's nice and gentle, and I feel like she doesn't push me too much, if that makes sense. I mean, they definitely have caffeine present in green or white tea, but you'll find some are more stimulating than others, and some have more L-theanine, so it's more calming. But yes, everybody's rolling in. Hey, folks. I told a story in the beginning that only people for the replay will be able to see, but my face is super red because I got stung by a bee. By a wasp, actually, so it didn't even die. At least when a bee stings you, you have like the satisfaction of knowing that they like sacrificed their life to die. But with a wasp, they'll just keep stinging, and it went up my dress and it stung me right there, and it's just Friday the 13th. So we're gonna make some tea, and then we're gonna let's see, and then we're gonna get through a Q&A and see how this goes. I don't know. I'm not allergic to bees. I just, like the site itches, and I've got stuff on it, obviously. But sometimes your body's just like, oh, okay, let's do a histamine. I've got like toxin pumping through me right now from that little bastard. I was like, oh man. And all summer, they're all like, you know what it is it's getting cold out, so they start getting grumpier, right? And all summer they've just been all through my garden, and we kind of just coexisted, and then this one just decided to make its way up my dress and tag me. But yeah, it does. It hurts. It burns. It's itchy like crazy, right? And I at first I thought, oh, maybe it just bit me. No, I can see the hole. Because when they bite, it hurts, but there's no venom, and so it just kind of goes away. But it'll be a day or two of really itching. But yeah, so for everybody showing up, I am going to brew myself a cup of tea, and then once I have tasted my tea, we'll start doing the Q&A. It just gives me time to settle in and time for folks to show up and to just jabber about stuff. I know people like to catch up. Pretty soon, I'm hopeful to get like Tea Time Tuesdays starting again. I know I used to do it every day, but I'll probably just do Tuesdays. It won't be this upcoming week. I'm shooting for week after next. I want to have this whole area that I'm in like claimed back and turned in fully back into my office. I've got a greenhouse right here that needs to come down and that type of stuff, and just refresh it and change it up, and then start just having morning teas on Tuesdays. But yeah, somebody said I just got all your books and I love them. I'm so glad they showed up safe too. The last month it's been pure chaos. There's this thing that happened between UPS and UPSP, the postal service and UPS. They merged. I don't know if you know that, but they like became a partnership where they do this thing called mail innovation, where it's like it ships through UPS all the way until it gets to its destination, and they kick it to the postal service, and then it just gets delivered to you like through the postal service. But this thing started happening where they weren't scanning the packages, and it just would go into like the black hole of unscanned package. But then customers didn't believe that we shipped anything because the tracking number would always say waiting for package from supplier, but we had already given it, right? And it was just chaos. And so we had to do like a bunch of stuff and completely switch our provider, because we just can't. I mean, they can't just take hundreds of packages and just throw them into like a black hole. And my favorite is always like somebody who's like understandably upset, but a super Karen. They're like, I've been shipping packages for a long time. I'm like, okay, but that's not right. Like, it's like there are different things that happen as things evolve and as you're bigger and you use fulfillment companies. And it's always just funny where I'm like, okay, all right, I guess I'm just not a real person. But no, it was crazy. It was really stressful. Been a really stressful month with that stuff. So that's really all I've been up to. Is I've been working on 2 books at the same time, trying to take care of myself and kind of just settling into fall. Working on like, well, living, I think. Like recovering and like learning about like with all of my genetic mutations, finding out like what works that and what best for me and how to function through that. But yeah, somebody said, oh yeah, I do ship worldwide. I do. I also have books available in the ebook format. That's a big thing that happens too. People will buy my ebooks, not realizing they've bought ebooks, and then being like, why haven't my order shipped? And I'm like, you bought ebooks. But if you accidentally buy ebooks, we can do a store credit. So you can go and put that towards the physical copies if you didn't mean to. But it's just that kind of thing. And I've been trying to like work on getting the website updated and just kind of, I don't know, I'm bouncing all over but making headway in all of it so I don't feel bad. I think it's something new because what I used to do was like hyper focus on just like one thing and one thing only until I got it done all the way. And that works really well and it's not a bad thing. But when I say I hyper focus, I mean it in like a huge way where like I don't exist outside of it and it doesn't leave room for anything else, including like taking care of myself. Right. And so I actually think like doing little bits at a time of each thing, like in a day, I'll work on a part of 3 different things I'm working on and then I back off. Right. And I find that while I might not get done as soon as I used to, it's definitely better for my physical health. It's definitely better for my mental health, right? My eyes strain looking at the computer. So I've just been trying something new, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? As a reminder, I started answering questions when I taste my tea. We're close. This is a 3-minute timer. 3-minute timer. It looks like there's tons of trolls today. I'm half. I'm conflicted. Me and my daughter, she admins here. She does an awesome job. We've talked about I can do this thing to where I can make it to where only subscribers can comment. And I think I might do that for the tea times just to make it more relaxing because it's morning time. But we talked about if I did that here, a lot of people that come across my live won't be able to ask a question right away, unless I said a million times you can't comment unless you subscribe. But my issue with that is these are rewatched. And so somebody will be confused because they'll think it's a live and that they can't comment on my videos. I don't know. So I don't know. We'll just wing it. We'll wing it. Besides, if we take away the trolls, that loses her job security. Right, no, we actually, like, my daughter's actually hired. She, like, full on paperwork works for us, She does a really good job moderating and handling that type of stuff and helping me with, like, social media and things like that. She's almost 18, so I don't have, like, a little kid doing this. That is tasty. That is really tasty. Okay, so if you have a question, I'm going to flip this over, even though I don't think it's accurate entirely. If you have a question, say question in all caps, and I'll see how I can stammer my way through questions today. I'm all fucking intoxicated from bee sting venom, and I feel kind of, I'm not dying or anything, and I can breathe, but we're going to have fun with it, see what happens. Question: what is extract powder on an ingredient first? How would you make it? So that's a good question. Extract powder is typically when a large amount of tincture is made and then it's basically dried down and until there's nothing left besides the powder, right? It's really hard to do at home. This is done on typically an industrial scale. You can try it. You might be able to get away with freeze drying, although I'm not sure how the alcohol would respond, but freeze drying does go through the hot process to evaporate off liquids, so it might work. Some people cook it down, but typically at home you end up with nothing but like a slurry, because in the like warehouses and things in the labs where they're making it in big amounts, they have like these really microfine sprayers where they're spraying the extract as it goes by, and it like flash dries it into a powder. So it's hard to make at home. It's not bad. Some stuff I work with that way, but usually I try to avoid it. Just because I know a lot of the water soluble properties are missing, but it really depends. But that's how they make it. Question: how long does it take? So if you mean tincture, how long does it take to make a tincture? Like these jars back here, which is where this one's a goldenrod tincture, where I've got alcohol plus goldenrod, 100 proof vodka. This one takes about 6 to 8 weeks to be ready. I'm using fresh plant matter. Some people, when they use grain alcohol and dried plant matter, that stuff is ready in a couple weeks, but don't let the quickness fool you. It's missing all of the water soluble properties. There's lots of math involved just so you can pretend like you're working with fresh plant matter. It's more likely to give you a bad reaction. But I just set these here on my shelf. They don't really get direct sunlight. They're not vampires. They don't have to be like in a dark, never see light area. Just don't put them in direct sunlight, and in 6 to 8 weeks they're ready. And if you forget to, after that, it's no big deal. They last as long as that cap is tight and the alcohol doesn't evaporate off. At no point in time have they gone bad because you forgot about them. Question: what is a good alternative rather than estrogen blocker? Well, just learning how to reduce your estrogen in the first place. Like, why is your estrogen high? And I know maybe you have a cancer that's estrogen positive, meaning it eats off of estrogen, so that's a little bit different. But learning how to avoid all things soy and rancid seed oils, which are, you know, the man-made PUFA oils and things like that, like canola, grapeseed oil, vegetable oil, all that stuff. And then learning how to support your progesterone levels, like with things like pine pollen, you know, or vitex berry, these things. You know, or even just like high doses of something like Progest E or something like that will inevitably like drop your estrogen down. But learning how to stop putting the phytoestrogens in your body is a big step at like reducing estrogen. And even if you go a pharmaceutical route, you would potentially need to use less of that pharmaceutical if you were also making sure to eat a diet that doesn't increase estrogen dominance. Okay, let me jump down here. Question: would knotgrass make a good salve to use topical for fibroid tumors or lipoma? You know, I haven't really come across or read anything specific about knotgrass for that. Right. I do know that I really like chickweed for that. I really like chickweed that is for anything that is like a growth or a fibroid or even ovarian cyst. It takes time. You could do a chickweed castor oil pack. Actually, sometime next week, I'm going to make like a big castor oil video, and I'll show you how to infuse herbs into it and how to do a castor oil pack and all that type of stuff. But I would really like that for that, but also like if you're going to want to move out the excess water and like the lymphedema, you could start working with like rebounding, dry brushing, calendula, cleavers, things that get your lymphatic system up and moving, but also make sure that you're doing the physical movements to help your body move that along, right? Like we can't just take lymphatic stimulators and then like sit in a chair all day. Right, we have to be moving our body. Question: what is the best way to use sarsaparilla roots? Usually it's the tea. Tincture's not bad either. Sarsaparilla is really great for like actually like binding to like toxins in your blood. And that's actually really unique. I know a lot of people think that a lot of plants do that, but how it actually acts in your body is different. I really like sarsaparilla for like pneumonia. It's pretty great for that, but just a tea or a tincture would work fine. You could grind them into capsules. It might be a little hard on your grinder though, like if you have like a coffee grinder or something like that, go easy on it because it's easy to burn that out, you know. Okay, so question: what is St. John's wort good for? Just found some growing wild. Well, I'd be surprised if what you found is the medicinal variety of St. John's wort, if it's still blooming, I should say. Most places she's like peak blooming, summer solstice, and then like way done and dead by now. But there are different types of like ornamental St. John's wort, so just make sure it's the correct kind. And like when you take a bloom and smash it between your fingers should be stained red. St. John's wort is really fantastic for nerve related head pain, I like her for that. Traditionally people will tell you that it's for depression, but I don't like how she stimulates serotonin, because serotonin is actually a stress hormone. So like elevating your levels isn't necessarily a good thing. You're wanting to elevate like your dopamine instead, right? Or your GABA, not necessarily your serotonin. But I do actually like her best for repressing things in the herpes related virus. I'm talking EBV, shingles, herpes, cold sores, all that type of stuff. She's really has an affinity for that. Now, topically, you can use St. John's wort to hold back like herpes and cold sores outbreaks, also to make them heal faster. You can make a St. John's wort infused oil. Now, it's one of the few oils that you do need to be working with fresh plant matter, and particularly the blooms, so you can catch the hypersin content that's in there, which is what makes it red, right? But also, people think that St. John's wort interacts with a lot of medication, but that's not really what happens. What happens is St. John's wort really ups your liver function. So let's say you take a medication like a mental health medication or a blood pressure medication or something like that. There's issues with the mental health one, and I'll get to that in a second. What happens is your liver starts functioning really fast, and your liver's job is to, well, it's really mainly to put nutrients into your body, but it also shuttles toxins out, right? Helps clean your blood, although it's not a filter, don't think of it that way. It shuttles toxins into your bowel, and you take a shit and the stuff is gone, right? But it doesn't know that the medication you're taking isn't a toxin, so it grabs onto it, right? It grabs onto your medication that may be supposed to be in your system for 24 hours, and suddenly it's not in your system anymore, and you could start going through withdrawal, your blood pressure could go through the roof, or your mental health could be impacted, and things like that. So it's not that St. John's wort's actually interacting with medication, it's that she's stripping it out of your body really fast by stimulating liver function. However, you can use St. John's wort topically just fine if you're on medications that she may interact with, because you're not going to be absorbing enough that it has that impact. So mainly I use St. John's wort topically, if I'm being honest. I don't really use her internally a whole lot. Question: what is your opinion of the Mirena IUD? I don't do chemical or otherwise birth control, and I know that it's such an individual choice, you have to like decide, but if you look at all of the history of birth control with women, yes, you can look at the it liberated us, it helped us be in more control of our body, but also there's lots of women dying of horrendous cancers. Look at the women who got the depot shot. Like statistically, they will like die of metastatic breast cancer, right? Like all that type of stuff. And so I really don't mess with hormones, right? Plus, they're constantly making your estrogen levels really, really high, right? Like they're not great. They cause a lot of problems for people, but if you're in a situation in your life where that's the only way that you feel like you'll have control over pregnancy, if you don't feel like you can reliably use things like condoms or spermicide, which is also kind of problematic but better than a constant hormone, right? If you feel like you can't do the rhythm method, or you wouldn't have access to make a choice if you had got pregnant, you just have to weigh the pros and cons of birth control. But there is no birth control that's hormone based, or even the copper IUDs cause toxicity that I feel good about. Question: where is a good place to purchase tinctures? You did not get the chance to make them this year. I would check on Etsy. Etsy's a good place, of course. Have a conversation with who's making it. See if they have a social media presence. In other words, I know, so you can see that they're like a real herbalist, that's a real person doing real things, and not somebody that's just fly by night, because they're small businesses, so they're more apt to answer your questions like, did you use fresh plant matter, right? If that's important to you, or other things like, are you using organic? Is this, is that? And so there's a lot. I started out on Etsy. I sold on Etsy for years, and there's a lot of other people doing the same thing. Question: what herbs work best for colds and the virus? Thank you. It just really depends, like, on what you've come down with, but I like a good onion and thyme tea if I'm working with something chest related. I like to use elderberry before I get sick, not after you get sick, because that can actually make your symptoms worse because she stimulates the immune system. But she's a good thing for like holding things back, like so you don't get as sick prior to getting sick, if that makes sense. I also really like lemon balm if I'm dealing with like nausea, or like shitting my brains out, or some sort of like, throw up flu type situation is really pretty good for that. If you've got a fever and a sore throat, I really like a yarrow tea for this. It really depends, and it's not one size fits all. Knowing what virus you may or may not be working with can be powerful because you can go and see what they're impacted by, right? Like something like, okay, we know that lemon balm is really impactful against the influenza virus, but we also know that St. John's wort might be more impactful against like EBV, even though lemon balm has some crossover for herpes related viruses. But there's different types of viruses, right? So learning about those categories and what you may or may not be dealing with can, get out of there. I just chased off two cats named Ricky and Swoop. Off they went. But learning about the type of virus is really impactful. Okay, question. What would you suggest to help with reducing, eliminating fatty deposits, topical or internal? So, topical, a lot of fatty deposits can actually be helped with dry brushing and rebounding. It's really about helping your body distribute them. And then, like, I don't want to say diet, because I don't mean diet in the way that you starve yourself, but sometimes if we eat the wrong type of fats, like if our diet is full of like rancid seed oils from ultra processed foods and the things like it's in everything. Even if you're buying organic, if you look at it, there's probably safflower or sunflower oil. What happens is our body does need PUFA oil to an extent from naturally occurring amounts, but when we ingest huge amounts, our body can't process it because we get depleted in vitamin E and then it starts just storing it. It starts just storing it. And I hate to say it, but that is actually like people blame sugar and carbohydrates for like the obesity epidemic in America, but it's actually the seed oils. Because we were eating sugar and carbohydrates long before people started slamming on weight. But what really happened was we started using rancid seed oils and everything. So, just shifting out how you use fat. I've literally seen people lose these fat deposits, lose weight by just changing over to like animal based fats, coconut oil, things like that, that aren't rancid. So it can make a huge difference in your life. Question. What can I do for toenail fungus? It really depends, but you have to be hyper clean. Like I'll tell you to get like oak bark and soak your feet in like an oak bark infusion, a good bar of sulfur soap, keep your feet clean. But remember, fungus spreads. So like if you do all these things to like kill the fungus, but then you put your feet back in the same shoes or you're walking on the same surface, you just pick it back up over and over again. But a foot soak is really good because you need something that can actually penetrate past the nail bed. And you know how your toenails are like easier to clip after like a bath or a shower? Well, that's because the water is able to soak into them. So oak bark infusion, usually a couple ounces into like a half gallon. And I like to use like one of those foot bath things that like gets hot and vibrates. I mean, not just because it feels good, but because it keeps the water hot, and after 20-30 minutes you've actually soaked it in versus just like a normal pot of water, right? Question. Can drinking 3 cups of tea a day hurt your hemoglobin count? Chamomile, Earl Grey, and green tea. No, hemoglobin is more to do with like your red blood cells. If you have a low hemoglobin count, you're probably low in copper, you're probably low in iron, you might not be eating enough vitamin C. Actually is really important for hemoglobin production, right? So, but I wouldn't suspect it was the tea causing it, or it would be a widespread issue, especially when you look at how much tea is consumed worldwide, right? But I mean, of course, you can. Oh, every body is different, so you could try quitting drinking it and see if it helps. But I suspect it's something different happening. Um, Question. What can we use for my husband's enlarged prostate? He is miserable because he can't empty his bladder. I really like fireweed or uva ursi for this. Now, fireweed is safe to use on a regular basis. You can get a tea or a tincture, right? It's a little more specific. If you live somewhere in like the western states, like, well, I should say the northern states and towards the western side, you could probably still harvest some fireweed. She's just about done blooming, but she's fine all the way until. But you can find fireweed online through some like boutique herbal places. Consistent use of fireweed would probably help shrink that prostate. Now, you could also use uva ursi, bearberry, knick, depending on what you want to call it, as a tincture. But you need to cycle with that one because consistent use can make your kidneys unhappy. So usually I do like 2 or 3 days a week with that, and then the rest of the time off, and in the meantime start using fireweed. There are other things, but I think those there are other things that people use, but they're like really they're hard on your body, right? And uva ursi is about as hard as I would go with that. Question: why does protein stop me from shaking like I'm diabetic with low sugar? Because protein stabilizes blood sugar. Now, so you probably need more protein, and women undereat protein all the time. Especially, I mean, we're told we're monsters at this point if we ingest any sort of meat, but then they're like, oh, eat this plant-based protein, but it might not do the same thing, right? It has different actions in the body and how it's like stabilized, right? um, so like carbohydrates give you physical energy, right? But they hit you fast. Protein is there to sustain you. Protein is there to slow down the carbohydrate intake and give you like meaningful energy all day long, right? So actually, anybody who is pre-diabetic or is worried about diabetes or anything like that, or just anybody in general, when you make yourself a meal, eat your protein first, then eat your carbohydrates, and your blood sugar will thank you, right? Because it's going to even things out for you. But listen to your body. Some people need more protein than others. I thrive on like a heavy protein diet, but most women will. And if you're having, like, just to put this out there, if you're like having like really painful periods and you're tired all the time and all that type of stuff, you probably need far more meat in your diet, right? Protein can really help with this. Question: what to do when the body doesn't seem to be absorbing, utilizing certain vitamins? For example, blood tests show normal calcium levels, but hair tests showed poor absorption. I take D3 with K2. Um, it can really depend. It can depend on your genetics, on the type of calcium you're eating. Some people think that D3 blocks the absorption of calcium, which is ironic because we need magnesium alongside of it. But have you gotten your magnesium tested? Right, because magnesium is important for like working with calcium. Right, so it's like you need the magnesium to process the calcium, and you need the calcium for the D3 and the K2, right? They all kind of go together. So I would look at magnesium. I would look at magnesium, but also if you've already taken an ancestry test or something like that, download your raw data pack that they have, like from your results, and upload it to somewhere like self decode or sequencing.com. I like sequencing.com a little bit better. They're more in depth, but I like self decode for people who are just getting started because it gives you like happy face, sad face. I know that I was like, fuck, it's kind of demeaning, but it helps you just like scroll through, and it could be like, hey, you need more of this vitamin. You might need more of this. Like you have genetic mutations in your SNPs that mean you need more vitamin K, or you need this or this or this or that. And so it's really helpful, and it's like 30, $40 if you've already taken a DNA test before. They offer tests individually, but if you already are like the millions who have taken those tests, you already have the data you need to upload and check out your genetics. Um, Question: is there a loose leaf tea I can drink that will fill me up with a bunch of minerals, or should I use Celtic salt? Heard good things about the salt. So you need salt no matter what. There's no tea that's going to replace it. People will undereat salt, and if you're one of those people that has been on a low salt diet for a long time, consider looking into the salt cure. If you're already eating salt, you probably don't need to look into that, but also look into nettle infusions. Look into my infusions playlist. These herbs are fantastic. Nettle is full of nutrients, and all the herbs I talk about in that playlist will help mineralize your body, but you'll still need to ingest sodium, and I like the Celtic salt. It's pretty much all we eat. Thank you so much for the super, Jonathan. um Explain complex versus simple carbohydrates, please. Okay, this is an easy one. So, something like, let's say, maple syrup, which is fantastic for you, by the way. It's loaded with B vitamins and manganese and magnesium, and it has all kinds of nutrients in it. It's not just sugar. But it's a simple carbohydrate because your body doesn't really have to break it down, and so it hits you really fast, and so you'll get like blood sugar up. It's why, like, if you eat like pure dextrose, suddenly your blood sugar will jump up because you're able to instantly absorb it. A complex carbohydrate is something like a sweet potato, right? You're cooking that, it's still carbohydrates, it still might impact your blood sugar, but it takes time to digest it. So the best way to look at simple carbs is that like it hits your system right away and helps you take off like a rocket, instant energy for your cells. A complex carb, you have to digest it and get the carbohydrates out of it, right? I eat a combination of both. Fruit is also kind of in a gray area because like fruit juice would be a simple carb, but like if it's something like a banana, it would be complex because it's starch, right? So it's kind of a gray area. Thank you so much for the super Raina, sorry. Question: How to melt coconut butter? How to melt coconut butter to use it for to melt things like resin or wax in it without getting rancid. Well, it shouldn't go rancid unless you've introduced like water to it, and I wouldn't suggest using anything that's going to put water in it. Now, things can go rancid without water eventually, but that won't happen because you're melting something into it. And if you're using it to break down a resin, you could use something like a small crock pot on the lowest setting just to break that resin down to hot. But if you're using something like a fragrant herb, you're going to want to use like the slow, low heat method of like a seed heating mat. Let me jump down here. Question: Can we use stinging nettle growing in the fall or only in the spring? Only in the spring for eating and making infusions, but in the fall you can gather those seeds like crazy, and make a tincture out of the seeds for like specific thyroid support. Some people also like cook with the seeds, but use them really slowly because they can make you like really jittery because of how hard they hit your thyroid like with stimulation, right? Um, Okay, so would love some suggestions for the best herbs and ways to help clear out lungs with all this bad air from wildfires. My heartbeat is racing. I'm coughing white mucus. It's hard to breathe. Couple things. Mullein, reishi, these are my go-to, right? You can make a mullein infusion, and if you can tolerate dairy, make sure that you strain the mullein infusion really well, and then toss in a little bit of honey and some full-fat milk or cream. Right. Milk, if you're not allergic to it, is really fantastic for supporting membrane health, right? It actually can go in there and coat, and they work really well together with mullein. A milk substitute won't be the same. You can add it if you want to, but it won't have the same like healing properties. And a lot of those have like rancid seed oils in there, so check your label. Um, but you can also use reishi mushroom. I'd suggest that as a tincture or a capsule. Don't let anybody lie to you and tell you that reishi tastes good as a tea. They are just lying. Those polypore mushrooms tend to taste like shit. But also make sure that you've got like not just an air purifier going on in your home, but also consider getting a humidifier, right? So what happens is the smoke is drying out your lungs and it causes irritation, but also it can help keep the air in your home cleaner from smoke because the moisture grabs onto the smoke particles and slams it to the ground, right? Making sure that you're dusting on a regular basis, mopping on a regular basis. I know nobody likes to do that stuff, but it keeps the smoke particles from being in your home and it helps a lot. Um, Herbs for long menstrual cycles. It depends on what the cause is, right? I would get a hormone test. I would look at like Let's Get Checked or Everywell from the ones you order for yourself. I like these ones because if you go to a doctor and you ask for a hormone test, they'll be like, okay, female, I checked estrogen. Good job. But I also need, they don't look at your progesterone or your testosterone. And looking at just your estrogen is fucking useless because you need to see if your estrogen is too high or too low in comparison to your testosterone as well as your progesterone. And I like the self-testing kits from either Everywell or Let's Get Checked because they always look at that. They look at the full picture so you can see what's going on there because there's something going on with your hormones if you're bleeding that long, for sure. And what's cool about the Everywell one is they actually account for that. They ask how long your cycle is and then they tell you to collect depending on your long cycle, right? And so that can really help. But getting that figured out is helpful. Also, my mind says to look into your vitamin K levels, K1 and K2, because sometimes we can bleed really heavily if we're deficient in vitamin K1 and K2, which is a really common deficiency, unfortunately, that they say isn't, but it definitely is. And it might not even be that you have long cycles. It might be that your body has a hard time stopping the bleeding, right? And so that might be something to consider. Question: what herbs help with swollen elbows that you can't bend? Well, you could probably try to do maybe like a comfrey compress to see if it's inflammation from that, but I don't know what's, without knowing what's causing it, right? Is it like an infection? Is it inflammation? Are you repeatedly using them? Do you have bad rheumatoid arthritis? If you haven't been seen by a doctor yet, it's worth going just so you can see what potentially is causing it, but you could try a comfrey compress on your elbows. um let's see. I've made shiitake and had a whole lot of yeah, added a whole. They're like, hey, my reishi tastes great with a whole lot of honey. Yeah, reishi. She's just so bitter. She's just so bitter. And I always laugh when you like grab one of those reishi drinks from the store and someone's like, it's delicious. And I'm like, I see your face when you take a drink, and I see how you didn't drink much of it. Right. So like, I think we've gotten into this realm where we tell ourselves because something is healthy, it tastes like shit, and we're just gonna power through it and be like, right? But um, when I'm feeling blue, I listen to you. Much gratitude and love. Well, thank you for that. I'm glad to know that I can uplift you with my random jabbering. It makes me, I mean, I'm grateful to hear it. I really am. It helps me keep going, and like, because sometimes I'm like, thank you so much for the super Janet Briggs question. Your thoughts on hormone therapy? Some women have great success with it and some don't. But the thing that I don't like about HRT is the same thing that I don't like about when you get your blood ran from a doctor is they only focus on estrogen, and that pisses me off because we are not, females just need estrogen and men just need testosterone. That doesn't work that way. We all, no matter what you were born as, have testosterone, estrogen, progesterone in your body, just in different amounts. Now, because women have really tiny amounts of testosterone, it's really easy for our testosterone levels to go low and make us really tired, have low libido, exhaustion, weight gain. But also because we're often dominant in estrogen, because we naturally have more estrogen, but also all of our food is full of soy isolates, and all of our food comes in BPA packaging, which is causing estrogen dominance as well. What happens is that estrogen pushes down your progesterone. And so you end up being up here and down here, and then they're like, oh, you're tired, here's some estrogen. But the thing about estrogen is blood tests aren't always reliable because it stores in fatty tissue. So when they're testing your blood for estrogen, it's really only giving a snapshot of what's free flowing in your blood at that moment. So it's better to go off of symptoms. And what's crazy is now women in menopause are still dealing with estrogen dominant symptoms even though they've entered menopause, because there's so much like soy in everything in the food that we eat. Even if you think that you don't eat soy, unless you are actively reading labels, it's everywhere, including the chocolate you might love, right? Soy lecithin is in everything, right? It's really problematic. So if I was going to do HRT instead of working with like pine pollen or wild yam and things like that, if I was going to do HRT, I would find an endocrinologist that is willing to work with all three amounts. Be like, I don't just want you to look at my estrogen levels. I want to make sure that I'm having bioavailable progesterone, and I want to make sure that I'm having bioavailable testosterone, and I want to do blood work every 3 to 4 months versus every year, and then you don't find out that my levels are way out of whack until 6 months after the fact, right? Do blood work more consistently and advocate for all the hormones if you're going to go that way. So, question, what do I recommend to shrink a cyst in the abdomen? I would start working with chickweed infusion, drink daily, chickweed infused castor oil packs topically, chickweed tincture, all things chickweed. It takes time, and don't skip on the castor oil packs. You can start using castor oil just as is for like cyst reduction, but I want you to also have a jar full of dried chickweed and castor oil infusing somewhere warm and dark for at least 6 to 8 weeks, and then strain that and use that castor oil to do your pack. So you're getting like the chickweed deep inside of yourself alongside the castor oil pack. Okay, so I think I've dumped my brain out for long enough. Thank you so much for being here with me. If I didn't answer your question, don't even worry about it. I do these every Friday. I have tons you can go rewatch. If you're a member and I missed your question, there is a post in the community section for members only where you can drop your question, because there's so many here. I miss people rolling by as the comments, right? And I'm a human with limitations. But if you're a member, you can drop your question there if I didn't answer you here. If you would like to support my capacity to teach freely, keep tea in my pot, roof over my head, that type of stuff, consider becoming a member. It's just a way to throw me a couple bucks a month. You get early access to videos, and you can ask me that question if I didn't happen to answer it here during the live. I feel bad when I miss a question that a member has been waiting to ask, right? So I thought I'd make that little place for it. But there is nothing hidden behind a paywall. If you can't afford to become a member, don't worry about it. I release a new video every week. Next up is a skull cap video coming up, and then this next week I will be doing a beet tincture, and then I'm going to be doing a castor oil pack, and I think a black walnut tincture. I've got those videos coming out, and if you want to see them early, you can become a member. If you can't afford that, or even if you can, or just want to check other things out, consider looking at my apothecary. I make all kinds of things. I've got books, synergism capsules. There's something for everybody. You can use the one-time code TEATIME, TEATIME, to save 10% off of anything you'd like to call home from the shop. And if you can't do any of that, what is really helpful is that you like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps other people realize that they are smart enough to do this. They can take their health back into their own hands. It gets my work out there. It's super, super impactful. So thank you so much for joining me, folks, and I'll see you next week. Bye.